The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, they looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what lay beyond. When they finally reached the stars in the year 2547, they found that the universe was already full of life. Hundreds of alien species had built empires, formed alliances, and created a massive organization called the Galactic Coalition. Humanity was the newcomer, the youngest species to join the great family of intelligent beings. 300 years had passed since that first contact. In all that time, humanity had earned a strange reputation among the stars. They were known as the patient ones, the peaceful ones, the species that never fought back. Captain Park stood at the window of her ship, the Gentle Dawn. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and black hair tied back in a simple style. Her ship floated near Nexus Station, a massive structure at the center of Coalition space where representatives from all species gathered to make decisions. The station was beautiful, covered in lights of every color, spinning slowly against the black emptiness of space. Her first officer, Lieutenant, walked up beside her. He was younger than her by 10 years, with a serious face and careful way of speaking. They had served together for 5 years now and trusted him completely. "Another bad day at the council," said quietly. His hands were folded behind his back. "What happened this time?" asked without turning from the window. "The ambassador." He stood up during Ambassador Myra's speech and called our delegation soft-skinned beggars. He said humans have no place in the coalition. He said we are barely more intelligent than animals. Closed her eyes for a moment. They were a warrior species, tall and covered in hard scales. They respected only strength and saw kindness as weakness. For the past 50 years, they had become more and more aggressive toward humanity. And how did Ambassador respond? Almost smiled. She thanked him for his opinion, then she offered him a cup of tea. This was the human way. Ambassador Myra was famous across the galaxy for her calm nature and gentle smile. No insult could break her peace. No threat could shake her patience. She represented everything humanity had become in the 3 centuries since joining the coalition. They were not the only species that treated humans poorly. The Empire charged human merchant ships 3 times the normal tax for passing through their space. When human traders complained to the coalition, they simply laughed. The consortium spread lies about humans on their news networks, calling them primitive creatures who had somehow stumbled into space travel by accident. And what did humanity do? They negotiated. They paid the unfair taxes. They sent cultural exchange programs to show the truth about human civilization. They smiled and bowed and accepted every insult with grace. Many species in the galaxy thought humans were simply weak. They believed that humans had no choice but to accept such treatment because they lacked the military power to fight back. This belief had spread so widely that even humanity's few friends in the coalition had begun to wonder if it was true. On Earth and the human colony worlds, children were taught a different story. They learned that peace was not the same as weakness. They learned that choosing not to fight was harder than fighting. They learned the old human saying, "The strongest warrior is the one who conquers his own anger." Admiral was the oldest human in coalition space. At 412 years old, kept alive by advanced medical technology, he had seen everything. He had been a young officer when humanity first made contact with alien life. He had watched his species grow from a single planet to 47 colony worlds spread across the galaxy. He had seen every insult, every unfair treaty, every act of disrespect that humanity had endured. And through it all, he had remained patient. Sat in his office on Luna Base, reading reports from the frontier. They had been moving ships closer to human space. They had set up checkpoints along major trade routes and were stopping human vessels for safety inspections that sometimes lasted for weeks. Several human merchant captains had reported their cargo being stolen by soldiers. A young officer knocked on his door. "Admiral, you have a message from Ambassador." "Send it through." Ambassador Myra's face appeared on his screen. Even at 70 years old, she still had the warm smile that had made her famous, but noticed something in her eyes today, a tiredness that had not been there before. "Admiral," she said, "the Coalition Council has rejected our complaint about the blockades. Again, the UN voted against us. The other species abstained." "That makes the 12th rejection this year," said calmly. "Yes," Myra paused. "Admiral, I must ask you something directly. How long can we continue like this? Our merchants are losing money, our colonists on the border are afraid, and every day they grow bolder." Admiral was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but firm. "Ambassador, do you know why humanity chose this path? Why we decided to be the peaceful species, the patient ones? Because war is terrible, because violence creates more violence. That is part of it, but there is another reason." He leaned forward. "When we first entered the galaxy, we studied all the species we met. We learned their histories, their wars, their rise and fall, and we discovered something important. The species that fought for everything, that responded to every insult with violence, they burned bright for a time, but they also burned out. They made enemies everywhere. Eventually, they were destroyed." He paused. "We chose to be different. We chose to absorb the insults, to pay the unfair prices, to smile at the propaganda. Not because we are weak, Myra, but because we are playing a longer game than anyone realizes." Ambassador studied his face through the screen. "And if our patience runs out?" Admiral did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "Then the galaxy will learn what humanity truly is, and they will never forget that lesson." Myra nodded slowly. She understood. For 300 years, humanity had chosen peace, but choice was the important word. It was always a choice, and choices could change. Far away, on the border between human space and territory, Captain Park watched the stars and wondered how much longer the peace would last. She did not know that the answer was coming soon. She did not know that in just 3 short months, everything would change. The long peace was ending, and what came next would shake the galaxy to its core. They had grown bold. Under their new leader, High Commander, they had started a campaign of harassment against human frontier colonies. It began small. A trade ship delayed at a checkpoint. A merchant captain forced to pay a bribe. A cargo container that disappeared during an inspection. Then it grew worse. Was a massive, even by the standards of his species. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scales from countless battles. He had risen to power by promising his people glory and conquest. In his eyes, humanity was the perfect target, weak, peaceful, and rich with resources. On the colony world of Nu, human settlers watched with growing fear as warships began patrolling their skies. Soldiers landed in their towns and walked through their streets. They broke windows. They destroyed vehicles. They laughed at anyone who protested. Governor Hand sent message after message to Earth, begging for help. Each time the response was the same: "Stay calm. Do not provoke them. We are working through diplomatic channels." The diplomatic channels were not working. At Nexus Station, Ambassador Myra presented evidence of violations to the Coalition Council. She showed recordings of soldiers destroying property. She played audio of commanders threatening human colonists. She submitted a formal complaint and requested sanctions against the Dominion. The Council voted. They were given a warning, nothing more. High Commander received the news and laughed. A warning. This was proof that the Coalition would never stand against him. This was proof that humanity stood alone. He decided it was time to make an example. Station was a small research outpost at the edge of human space. It floated in orbit around a gas giant, far from any major colony. 300 scientists lived there, studying the strange life forms that drifted in the planet's atmosphere. They were peaceful people, dedicated to knowledge and discovery. 62 children lived on the station. Sons and daughters of the scientists, They went to school in the station's education center. They played in the recreation areas. They dreamed about the mysteries of the universe. One of those children was a girl named Park, the niece of Captain Park. She was 8 years old, with her aunt's sharp eyes and curious mind. She wanted to be a starship captain when she grew up. On the morning of the attack, Station Director IM received a message from a warship. The ship's commander informed her that Station was located in disputed territory. She had 6 hours to evacuate all personnel. Director IM was a calm woman, but this message made her hands shake. She knew there was no way to evacuate 300 people in 6 hours. She also knew that Station was clearly within human space. The claim had no legal basis. She sent a message to the coalition, requesting emergency arbitration. Then she contacted Earth, informing them of the threat. Finally, she sent a reply to the commander. "This station operates under coalition law," she said. "We are in undisputed human territory. Your claim has no validity. We will not evacuate." The commander smiled when he received her response. He had hoped she would refuse. 6 hours later, the warship opened fire. The attack lasted only 4 minutes. Station had no weapons, no shields, no defenses of any kind. It was a research facility, nothing more. The missiles tore through the station's hull like paper. The oxygen rushed out into space. The lights went dark. 300 people died. 62 of them were children. Among them was Park, who never got to become a starship captain. The news reached Earth 3 hours later. It spread across the human worlds like fire. On every colony, on every space station, on every ship, humans stopped what they were doing and listened in horror. Captain Park was on the bridge of the Gentle Dawn when Lieutenant handed her the report. She read it twice, her face completely still. Then she saw her niece's name on the casualty list. Watched her carefully. He had never seen his captain like this. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were dry. Something was happening inside her, something terrible and cold. "Captain," he said softly, "I am so sorry." Did not respond. She simply stared at the name on the list. Park, age 8. At Luna Base, Admiral received the news in silence. He sat alone in his office for 1 hour, not moving, not speaking. Then he stood up and walked to his communication console. "Connect me to all fleet commanders," he said. "Priority Alpha." The officer on the other end hesitated. Priority Alpha had not been used in the entire history of the human fleet. "Sir, are you certain?" "Do it." Within minutes, every fleet commander in human space was listening. Admiral's face appeared on screens across 47 worlds. 300 of our people are dead," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that made strong men shiver. 62 children are dead. They have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. Effective immediately, I am activating Protocol Omega. Across the fleet, officers looked at each other in shock. Protocol Omega was a legend, a rumor, something that was never supposed to happen. Most of them did not even know what it meant. But the oldest officers knew. The ones who had been serving for over a century knew, and their faces went pale. On the Gentle Dawn, Captain Park received new orders. Her voice was steady when she spoke to her crew, but Lieutenant could see the fire burning in her eyes. "Set course for Earth," she said. "Maximum speed." Captain asked, "What about our diplomatic mission?" Turned to look at him. For a moment, she was not the calm, patient officer he had served with for 5 years. For a moment, she was something else entirely. "The time for diplomacy is over," she said. "We are going home. We have work to do." As the Gentle Dawn jumped into faster-than-light travel, the galaxy continued as normal. They celebrated their victory. The other species gossiped about the attack but did nothing. The Coalition Council expressed concern and called for an investigation. None of them understood what they had done. None of them realized that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. Humanity's patience had finally reached its limit, and the consequences would change everything. In the weeks after the massacre, the galaxy began to notice something strange. At first, it was small things. A human merchant ship that did not arrive at its destination. A human restaurant on Nexus Station that closed without explanation. A human diplomat who canceled a meeting and never rescheduled. Then it became bigger. Every human trading company closed its doors on the same day. Thousands of human workers packed their belongings and boarded transport ships heading toward Earth. When they demanded an explanation, they received only silence. On Prime, the human embassy lowered its flag and locked its gates. Ambassador Myra's staff boarded a shuttle and departed without a word. The news networks, which had spent years mocking humanity, suddenly found they had no human targets left to mock. Throughout Coalition space, humans were disappearing. Not violently, not dramatically. They simply packed up and left, quietly, calmly, like they had somewhere else to be. They did not notice at first. High Commander was too busy celebrating his victory at station. He held parades on his. He gave speeches about strength. He promised his people that more conquests would follow. But his intelligence officers were growing worried. They sent him reports about the human exodus. They told him about the strange silence from Earth. They warned him that something was wrong. Ignored them. Humans were cowards, he said. They were running away because they were afraid. This proved everything he had always believed about them. He was completely wrong. On the final day of the human withdrawal, Ambassador Myra walked into the Coalition Council chamber for the last time. She had been on this station for 30 years. She knew every corridor, every meeting room, every quiet corner where deals were made and secrets were shared. Today, she would say goodbye to all of it. The chamber was full. Representatives from every major species had come to hear her speak. Some were curious. Others were worried. A few were smug, believing that humanity was about to admit defeat. Myra walked to the central platform and stood in silence for a long moment. Her famous smile was gone. Her warm eyes were cold. When she spoke, her voice echoed through the chamber like a funeral bell. 312 innocent lives were taken at station, she said. 62 of them were children, scientists, researchers, people who had dedicated their lives to peaceful discovery. She paused. The chamber was absolutely silent. In the weeks since that attack, humanity has submitted 47 formal requests for justice. We have asked for the criminals to be arrested. We have asked for reparations for the families. We have asked the Coalition to honor its own laws and hold the accountable. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every representative. Every request every appeal was ignored. The Coalition has made its position clear. Human lives do not matter. The representative opened his mouth to protest, but Myra continued before he could speak. For 300 years, humanity has been a faithful member of this coalition. We have paid our dues. We have followed the rules. We have contributed to the common good. We have absorbed insults, endured unfair treatment, and smiled through it all, because we believed in the dream of a united galaxy. We believed that patience and kindness would eventually win respect. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. She placed it on the podium. We were wrong. The words hung in the air like a knife. This is a formal declaration of withdrawal. As of this moment, humanity is no longer a member of the Galactic Coalition. All treaties are canceled. All trade agreements are void. All mutual defense pacts are ended. The chamber exploded in noise. Representatives shouted questions. Diplomats argued with each other. Security officers looked confused. Through it all, Myra stood still and calm. The representative finally made himself heard above the chaos. He was an old creature with silvery skin and too many eyes. He had spent decades spreading lies about humanity. Now he was laughing. "And what exactly will you do, Ambassador?" he asked, his voice dripping with contempt. "Run back to your little planet and hide. We will blockade your system. We will starve you out. Within 10 years you will come crawling back, begging for readmission." Myra looked at him. Her gaze was steady, unblinking. The ambassador found himself feeling something he had not felt in centuries: fear. "You have fundamentally misunderstood what humanity is," Myra said. She turned and walked out of the chamber. Within hours, the reports began flooding coalition intelligence networks. They came from spies, from informants, from long-range sensors, from every source imaginable, and they all said the same thing. Something was happening in human space. Deep within the atmosphere of gas giants, hidden construction facilities were powering up. Inside the cores of dead moons, shipyards that had been building in secret for 300 years were finally opening their doors. On every human world, factories that had been disguised as civilian industry were switching to their true purpose. And ships, so many ships. Coalition intelligence had believed that humanity possessed approximately 500 warships, a respectable fleet, but nothing compared to the great powers of the galaxy. The alone had over 30,000 military vessels. But the sensors were now detecting something impossible. From hidden locations across human space, new ships were emerging, thousands of them, then tens of thousands, ships that had never appeared in any database, ships built with technology that coalition scientists could not even identify. The High Commander finally stopped celebrating. He stared at the reports with growing horror. "How many ships?" he demanded. His intelligence officer swallowed hard. "Sir, current estimates suggest the human fleet numbers over 50,000 vessels, possibly more. We are still detecting new contacts." "That is impossible. Where did they come from?" "We do not know, Commander. They appear to have been built in secret for a very long time." Grabbed the report and threw it across the room. His scales were turning dark with fear. For the first time in his life, he understood that he had made a terrible mistake. Humanity had not been weak. Humanity had not been cowardly. Humanity had been waiting. And now the wait was over. Across the galaxy, species that had laughed at humanity were suddenly very, very quiet. They watched their sensors. They counted the ships. They remembered every insult they had ever spoken. And they began to be afraid. Admiral stood on the bridge of the Eternal Patience. It was the flagship of the United Human Fleet, a ship so large that it made dreadnoughts look like toys. The vessel had been built in secret over the course of 200 years, hidden inside an artificial asteroid where no coalition sensor could find it. Around the Eternal Patience, 10,000 warships waited in formation. Each one was a masterpiece of engineering, designed by the greatest minds humanity had produced. For 3 centuries, while the galaxy laughed at human weakness, the best scientists on Earth had been working on a single project, preparing for the day when patience was no longer enough. That day had come. Captain Park stood at the command console of her new ship, this memory. It was a dreadnought-class vessel, painted in the colors of the destroyed research station. On its hull, in letters 10 meters tall, were the names of all 312 victims, including Park. Lieutenant worked beside her, coordinating with the other ships in their battle group. He had not seen his captain smile since the day they received news of the massacre. He was not sure she would ever smile again. "Admiral on the channel," a communications officer announced. The screen flickered to life, showing Admiral's weathered face. He was 412 years old, but his eyes were sharp and clear. He had waited his entire life for this moment. "All ships," he said. "This is Admiral. In a few minutes we will jump to space. Our mission is simple. We will destroy their military capability. We will capture those responsible for the massacre. We will make certain that nothing like this ever happens again." He paused, and his voice became softer. "Many of you are angry. Many of you want revenge. I understand. I share your pain, but remember who we are. We do not murder innocent people. We do not destroy those who cannot fight back. When this is over, we will be judged not only by our victory, but by how we achieve it." Across the fleet, 10,000 captains listened in silence. Today, humanity shows the galaxy what we truly are. Not victims, not cowards, but not monsters either. We are something the galaxy has never seen before. Let us make them understand. The transmission ended. Captain took a deep breath and looked at her crew. "You heard the Admiral," she said. "Prepare for jump." The fleet disappeared into faster-than-light travel. When they emerged, they were at the edge of space. High Commander had prepared for their arrival. He had gathered every warship in the Dominion, calling in vessels from every corner of their territory. Over 30,000 ships formed a defensive line around the approach to there. It was the largest fleet ever assembled in Coalition history. Stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Conqueror's Glory. His scales were dark with anger, but also with fear. The reports about the human fleet had proven true. They were outnumbered, but not by as much as he had expected. And the human ships were strange, covered in weapon systems that his officers could not identify. He broadcast a message on all frequencies. "People of the galaxy, the humans have revealed their true nature. They come as conquerors, as invaders. All species must unite against this threat. If they defeat us today, you will be next." His words reached every corner of Coalition space, and they fell on uncertain ears. They remembered the unfair taxes they had charged human merchants for generations. They remembered the cruel lies they had spread about humanity. The other species remembered their silence when Station burned. Now they watched their screens and said nothing. No one came to help The Battle of Prime began at exactly midnight, Coalition Standard Time. It would be studied in military academies for thousands of years afterward. They attacked first, sending waves of fighters toward the human line. They expected the humans to retreat, to be cautious and defensive. Instead, the human fleet moved forward. The first volleys from human weapons shocked the commanders. Energy beams cut through shields that were supposed to be impenetrable. Missiles struck with precision that should have been impossible. Ships that they thought were safe exploded without warning. But it was not just the technology that won the battle. It was the way the humans fought. Military doctrine was rigid and hierarchical. Every ship followed orders from above. Every captain waited for permission before acting. When their commanders were killed, their fleets fell into confusion. Human commanders were different. They had been trained to think for themselves, to adapt to changing situations, to make decisions in seconds. When one strategy failed, they invented a new one. When an opportunity appeared, they seized it without hesitation. Captain Park commanded her battle group with cold precision. This memory carved through the formation like a knife. She did not feel satisfaction. She did not feel joy. She simply did what needed to be done. Lieutenant watched her work and felt a chill run down his spine. This was not the calm, patient captain he had served with for 5 years. This was something harder, something forged in grief and loss. He wondered if the old captain would ever come back. The battle lasted 4 hours and 23 minutes. When it ended, the fleet was destroyed. Over 30,000 ships reduced to floating debris. High Commander was captured alive, his flagship disabled by precise shots that killed his engines without breaching his hull. The human fleet surrounded Prime. Below them, 5 billion waited in terror. They knew what they had done to Station. They expected the same in return. Admiral looked at the planet on his screen. One order and he could turn it into a dead world. The weapons existed. The justification existed. By the rules of war as they understood them, he would be entitled to do it. He thought of the 62 children who died on Station. He thought of Park, who wanted to be a starship captain. He thought of all the years of insults and disrespect and cruelty that humanity had endured. Then he thought about what humanity was supposed to be, and he made his decision. "All ships," he said quietly, "hold fire, no orbital bombardment. I repeat, no bombardment." On this memory, Captain heard the order and closed her eyes. Part of her, a dark part she did not like to acknowledge, had wanted to see Prime burn, but she understood the Admiral's choice. This was not who they were. The galaxy watched in disbelief. The humans had won. They could destroy the completely. Why were they stopping? They were about to learn the answer. Admiral's transmission was broadcast across every coalition world, translated into 1,000 languages, and recorded for all time. It became the most watched message in galactic history. He stood on the bridge of the Eternal Patience, looking directly into the camera. Behind him, through the massive observation windows, the planet Prime hung in space, defenseless and afraid. "People of the galaxy," he began. His voice was calm, almost gentle. "What you are witnessing is the end of a war, not the beginning of one." He paused, letting his words settle across the countless billions who were watching. 30,000 warships have been destroyed. Their military power is broken. Their lies open before us. By the rules of war as they have practiced them, we would be justified in bombarding this planet until nothing remains. We could turn 5 billion living beings into ash. The entire galaxy held its breath. "We will not." On 100 worlds, viewers looked at each other in confusion. The ambassador, watching from Nexus Station, dropped his drink in shock. This was not how wars were supposed to work. This was not how strong species treated weak ones. Admiral continued. 312 innocent people died on station. 62 of them were children. Their only crime was being human. Their only mistake was believing that the galaxy would protect them. His old eyes grew harder. "We came here to deliver justice, not extinction. The criminals who ordered and carried out the massacre will face trial. High Commander has already been taken into custody. Others will follow. The military will be dismantled. Weapons will be destroyed. Reparations will be paid to the families of the victims." He stepped forward, his face filling the screen. "But the people will live. Their children will grow up. Their civilization will continue, because humanity does not murder innocents no matter what has been done to us. This is who we are. This is who we have always been." On this memory, Captain Park watched the broadcast with tears running down her face. She thought about her niece, the little girl who would never grow up. She thought about the rage that had burned inside her for weeks, the dark voice that whispered about revenge. Lieutenant stood beside her, silent and respectful. He had worried about his captain, about what the grief would do to her. Now he watched her cry and felt hope. The old was still in there somewhere. Admiral was finishing his speech. "To the other species of this galaxy, I have one final message. For 300 years, humanity chose peace. We absorbed your insults because we believed in diplomacy. We paid your unfair taxes because we believed in trade. We smiled at your propaganda because we believed that truth would win in the end." His voice became quiet, but somehow it filled every corner of the universe. "We made those choices because we are civilized, because we believe that intelligent beings should solve problems without violence, because we hoped the galaxy would eventually learn to treat us as equals." He paused. "We were patient, perhaps too patient. Perhaps our patience led you to believe we were weak. Perhaps it made you think that you could do anything to us without consequences." Now his voice became steel. "Let me be very clear. The mercy we show today is a choice, a deliberate, conscious decision. We have the power to destroy any species that threatens us. We have weapons you cannot imagine, fleets you did not know existed, and technologies you will not understand for centuries. We have been preparing for this moment for 300 years. Every species in the galaxy suddenly felt very small. If anyone ever again targets our innocent people, there will be no waiting period. There will be no 47 diplomatic requests. There will be no second warning. The response will be immediate, overwhelming, and final. Admiral let those words hang in the silence for a long moment. Then his expression softened. We do not want to use this power. We still believe in peace. We still hope that one day this galaxy will become the united family of intelligent beings that we dreamed of joining 3 centuries ago. But that dream requires trust. It requires fairness. It requires all species to be treated with dignity and respect. He stepped back. The choice is now yours. Humanity has shown what we are. We are patient, but we are not weak. We are merciful, but we are not helpless. Remember this day, learn from it, and perhaps together we can build something better. The transmission ended. In the Coalition Council chamber, Ambassador Myra returned to reclaim humanity's seat. The representatives who had once laughed at her now could not meet her eyes. The ambassador looked like he had aged 100 years overnight. Myra took her seat and waited. The chamber was silent. Finally, the council speaker, an ancient being from a species that had seen empires rise and fall for 10,000 years, spoke. The coalition recognizes humanity's return, she said, and we acknowledge that mistakes were made. Myra nodded calmly. Humanity is prepared to rejoin the coalition under one condition. A new charter must be drafted, one that guarantees equal protection for all species, regardless of their military strength, one that ensures that what happened at Station can never happen again. The vote was unanimous. In the years that followed, the galaxy changed. The new charter became the foundation of a more just society. Species that had once bullied the weak began to reconsider their behavior. The story of humanity was taught in schools across 1,000 worlds. Captain Park eventually became Admiral Park. She dedicated her life to protecting others, to making sure no child would ever suffer the fate of her niece. She never forgot, but she learned to carry the grief without being consumed by it. Lieutenant served beside her until he became a captain himself, then an admiral, then the commander of the entire fleet. He taught young officers about patience and strength, about mercy and justice. Ambassador Myra lived to see her 100th birthday, surrounded by friends from dozens of species. She was known as the architect of the new galactic order, the woman whose smile could calm any storm. An admiral, the oldest human in coalition space, finally allowed himself to rest. He had spent 400 years waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what humanity truly was. Now that it was done, he could die in peace. The lesson he taught would never be forgotten. Humanity's patience was their greatest strength. Their restraint was their greatest weapon. Their mercy was their greatest victory. But no species in the galaxy would ever forget what happened when humanity's patience was pushed beyond its limits. Some lessons once learned are remembered forever.